Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome. Hi. So nice to see you guys. And I'm going to put it on the gallery view for a second so I can see everybody who's on here. Hi, Dad. Hi, Mom. These are my parents, everybody, where it says Ida phone. I think this is the first year that you're going to be in on, Daddy. Very exciting for everybody, or me only. So I'd like to start off by saying there was a placard on the screen before, but this year is being sponsored. Thank you, Shimon. This year is being sponsored by the Berko and Deutsch families. Li'ilui Nishmat Malka Bas Chaim and Sarah, who was Miriam Deutsch's mother. Mordechai ben Avraham Abba and Sarah, who was Avram Deutsch's father and Rachel Berko's grandfather. And Aryeh Leib Halevi ben Nachum Yechezkel. That name is not up there, but Aryeh Leib Halevi ben Nachum Yechezkel was Rachel Berko's maternal grandfather. So they're all having yurtzites this week, soon, and the shir is being given that their neshamas should have an aliyah, and the families should feel connected, and all of Am Yisrael should have the schus that they're bringing down on us, and our Torah learning should be in their schus. So we're going to delve into a pretty big topic tonight, the topic of Ahavas Yisroel. And we know that specifically during this time period, we're in the opening stages still of the Omer. Actually, I guess we're more than halfway, just over halfway there. But during this time period, we know that the famous lesson that we learn is that Rabbi Akiva's 24,000 students were dying during this time period. And that's why we observe many customs of mourning during this time period, and that the Gemara tells us that it had to do with a lack of respect, the way that they treated each other. So we'll get into that a little bit more later, but Dafka, during this time, it's really good to learn about Ahavas Yisrael. It's really good to learn all the, hashkafically, halachically, all kinds of ways in order to incorporate this ideal into our lives. So I actually want to start out with a beautiful, beautiful story that I heard last year, and it just hasn't left me. It's one of these stories that I hope will stay with you as much as it has stayed with me. I'm zocha to be part of a beautiful online learning community called the Women's Online Beit Midrash, and it was started by a man who thought that there should be an online platform for women, Davka, women and female Torah teachers, Torah learners. His name is Johnny Solomon, so if anybody knows him, he teaches at Lindenbaum, I believe, and he posted this story, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it, so I wanted to share it with you guys. It's a story that was, I think, published in one of Rabbi Pesach Kron's books. But anyway, it's about a rabbi whose name was Moshe Pluchak. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And he was a teacher in Brooklyn, and he used to go up to the mountains to, a bungalow colony every summer. And he was part of like a kollel there. And one particular summer, he noticed that there was a man coming in, and he'd never seen him before, and he was carrying an art scroll Gemara with him. And he would learn in the corner, and he looked like he was very much, concentrating, focusing on his learning. But every now and then he would get up and he would talk to the groups, and it became clear that he was asking questions, that he didn't understand what he was learning. So clearly it was his first time around, and he was really trying very, very hard to learn. And at one point, Rabbi Pluchak went over to introduce himself and talk to him, and he said, it's amazing, it's amazing that you're learning with such diligence. And the man said to him, Rabbi, I have to tell you that I actually have advanced liver cancer, and this learning is mamish keeping me going. Like every day when I come here and I learn, this is what gives me chayas. This is what gives me energy and strength to keep on going. And so I here I come, every day, every day. And he said, I never got a chance to learn in yeshiva. And so, it's such a wonderful atmosphere, but I don't always understand, what I'm learning. And so, I go and I ask, and it's so nice that everybody around here is patient with me and they explain. I still don't always understand, but it's just so wonderful. Anyway, the summer went on, and one day towards the end of the summer, Rabbi Pluchak came in and he saw this man, sitting off to the side, kind of dejectedly, and he went over and he said to him, what's going on? You look very down. And he said, Rabbi, I don't know what I'm doing this for. I don't know why I come here every day. I'm not, I barely understand anything that I'm learning. And why what does it matter anyway? Look at all these men, they're here and they're real learners. I'm not a real learner. I can't keep up with them. And what does it matter to Hashem anyway? Like, my learning doesn't even matter. And Rabbi Pluchak, this is like one of these moments that like everybody, Torah teachers, Jews all over the world, like when someone bears their soul like that to you, like, what do you say? And he happened to have the night before listened to a radio show, a Jewish radio show, and he heard the most incredible story. And it was exactly like Hashgacha Pratis, the exact thing that he needed to give over to this guy. So the story went that there was an amazing Italian composer, Arturo Toscanini. And he was apparently an absolute perfectionist. He died in 1957, so at the age of 90. And he was a total perfectionist. And there was a man that was writing a biography about Toscanini. And so over the years, he was like interviewing him periodically. So one night he called the composer, Toscanini, and he said, I'd like to come over and ask you a few questions. And Toscanini said to him, no, you can't come over. I'm doing something very, very important tomorrow night, and I can't have you here. And the biographer was obviously intrigued. And so he said, what are you doing? That's so important. Can I come and sit with you? And he's like, no, I can't. There's a concert being played in New York, and I can't be there. I guess he was advanced in age. And I used to be the conductor of that orchestra, and I want to hear the symphony that they're playing. And so I'm going to listen to it over shortwave radio. I don't even know what that means, but okay. But over shortwave radio. And I guess it wasn't going to be like the clearest, but that was what he had. And I can't have you here because you're going to want to talk to me, and I need total silence. And so the biographer said, please, Maestro, it would be my absolute honor to sit and watch you listen to this symphony. And so, Toscanini basically made him promise that he wasn't going to say anything, he wasn't going to make any noise, he wasn't going to move, he wasn't going to breathe, whatever. And so the biographer agreed. And they sat there and they listened to this amazing, amazing symphony. And at the end, the biographer was like blown away. And he said to him, Maestro, wasn't that amazing? And Toscanini said, it was okay, like that. And he was like, what do you mean? How is it? It was so beautiful and all the, And Toscanini said, it wasn't so great because there were supposed to be 120 musicians, including 15 violinists, and there were only 14 playing. And the biographer was like, how could you possibly know that, And he kind of thought like, all right, whatever, maybe it was the static, maybe it was, the sound, I'll just, But then the next day he went home, and the next day the curiosity was like eating away at him. So he actually called New York, and he got in touch with the concert hall, and he asked for the director, and he asked him how many musicians were supposed to be playing last night and how many showed up. And the conductor said, there were supposed to be 120 musicians, but one of the violinists didn't show up. So there were only 14 and not 15. And the guy was like blown away totally. And he called Toscanini, or he went over to his house, and he said to him, I can't believe from 6,000 miles away, that you could hear that one violin was missing in a 120-piece orchestra. And Toscanini smiled at him and he said, there's a big difference between you and me. You're part of the audience. So to you, everything sounds wonderful, but I'm the conductor. And so I need to know every single note that has to be played. And I know when there is a note that's missing, and there were notes that were missing. And so I know that not all the violinists were there. And so this was the story that Rabbi Pluchak told to this man. And he said to him, maybe to regular people, it doesn't make a difference if you learn, right? But to Hashem, the creator of the world, the conductor of the universe, it makes all the difference in the world. He knows all of the voices that are supposed to be being used. He knows all of the Torah that's supposed to be being learned. And to him, it makes an inordinate amount of difference, an extraordinary amount of difference. So that story, I feel like, embodies the attitude of Ahavas Yisroel. It's, obviously there's the obvious part about, the rabbi wanting to make someone feel better. The end of the story, by the way, is unfortunately this man did pass away, but the son actually said to Rabbi Pluchak, he said, I don't know what you said to my father at some, but his learning was, like increased, towards the end of his life. And it just gave him so much chayas. So thank you so much for, for supporting him. So there's the obvious, Ahavas Yisrael of that, but there's the less obvious, sort of the mashal, that we are all part of one big body that's called Am Yisrael. And every single one of us is essential to the body that is called Am Yisrael, to the symphony that's called Am Yisrael. So I want to delve deeply into this mitzvah tonight, and I have a source sheet for you here, and I'm gonna share it as soon as I share screen. Here we go. Here we go. Okay, so let's see if I can. Oops. Okay, sorry. Let's see if I can look at one page instead of two. Sorry. Is that better or worse? Okay, it's bigger anyway. Okay, so at the very beginning of our history as a nation, we get the Torah, okay? And that's basically that's the turning point in world history. It's certainly the turning point in Jewish history, and it's like the most dramatic moment of all time. And look what the Torah says, right? Vayis'u merafidim vayavo midbar Sinai, right? They journeyed from Refidim and they came to the wilderness of Sinai. V'yachanu bamidbar, right? And they camped in the wilderness. And then, of course, famously it says, the Torah says, Vayachen sham Yisrael neged hahar. And Bnei Yisrael camped there in front of the mountain. But the form of the verb vayachen, that is singular. And so Rashi says here in source number 2, Rashi says, Vayachen sham Yisrael, ke'ish echad belev echad. And it's so beautiful, right? This concept that we all, came together and we were all camped out at the mountain and there was peace and there was harmony and we were like lev echad and, and then Rashi's sentence goes on and he says, Aval she'ar kol hachaniyot betarumot ubamachloket. But all of the other encampments throughout history have been with disagreements and strife. And what I think is interesting about that, let's say, is that one of them is the ideal and the other one is kind of the reality. But that doesn't mean that we can't strive for the ideal. In fact, the whole point, when we read a sentence like this in Rashi, we understand that we're not the first generation that has had trouble with this mitzvah. We're not the first generation that needs to work really hard to be in the place of Ke'ish Echad B'Lev Echad. And so we understand that it's something that is a daily challenge for us, but it's also something that is basically given to us, okay? The prerequisite of receiving the Torah was Ahavas Yisroel. So it happened. And if it happened once, it can happen again. Maybe not, I mean, yes, eventually all of us, but in each one of our lives, it can happen in little pieces. It can happen, you know, several times a day. It can happen, you know, and one of the things that we always talk about, especially when we learn Hasidus, is how everything is a work in progress. And everything is a way of, you know, everything is something, everything that we learn is a growth outlook, right? We're striving to do that. Okay, so we get this mitzvah. We got it actually in last week's parsha in Kedoshim. It says here, Vayikra, okay, in Vayikra from last week's parsha, 19:18, Lo tikom v'lo titar, you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen, es b'nei amecha. And then it says, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your fellow as yourself, ani Hashem, I am Hashem. So that's the mitzvah. That's how it's written in the Torah. Let's see what Rashi says about it. Rashi actually quotes the famous Rabbi Akiva. He says, Amar Rabbi Akiva, ze klal gadol b'Torah. So what does a klal gadol mean? Klal gadol basically means a foundational principle, okay? A main idea of Torah. It's a foundational idea. And essentially the meaning behind that is that all the other mitzvahs are kind of resting on the principle of Ahavas Yisrael, on Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. But it's also very important to understand or to see, to take note, that the end of the pasuk says Ani Hashem. Why does the end of the pasuk say Ani Hashem? And we have here a very important principle, and that is that love of another Jew is really the same thing as love for Hashem. So I'll explain that a little bit more. But just before I explain it, there's a beautiful, beautiful remez that I heard that Rabbi Moshe Wolfson said, that if you look at the gematria, and I actually worked this out, so I promise you I'll happy to send it to anybody that doesn't want to work it out for themselves, that Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha has the same gematria as Ve'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha. They both have the gematria of 907. So I actually sat here with a calculator with my pen and paper, and I worked it all out, and I was like so sure it wasn't going to work out, and that, you know, that you were going to have to do all some kind of, you know, this kind of gematria, and it's like just straightforward mamish gematria. It adds up. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, to love your fellow as yourself, is the same gematria, means the same thing as Ve'ahavta Hashem es Hashem Elokecha. So, you know, if I don't say anything else tonight, then maybe you'll just hear that, okay? But the Rebbe here says, okay, source number 5, the Rebbe says the 3 loves. So I want to just actually just give you a little bit of background of this quote. First of all, the Zohar teaches that Hashem, the Torah, and Bnei Yisrael are one. And, oh yeah, I wish I could go back to, sorry. Okay, whatever. Just when I get to this side, it's going to be a problem, but we'll all have to move our little panel over to the other side. Okay, so the Zohar teaches that Hashem, Torah, and Bnei Yisrael are one. And if any of them are lacking, then they're all lacking. And the Rebbe, this quote here is actually from when the Rebbe first became Rebbe, which was Yud Shvat 1951. This is the very first time that the Rebbe spoke as Rebbe. And he said this: the 3 loves, love of God, love of Torah, and love of one's fellow, are one. One cannot differentiate between them, for they are of a single essence. And since they are of a single essence, each one embodies all 3. When there is love of God, but not love of Torah and love of Israel, this means that the love of God is also lacking. Okay, so that's a really, really important principle, which means that, you know, if someone thinks that they're, you know, being super holy and doing all the mitzvahs, you know, ben adam lamakom, between man and God, and they're kind of not really worrying about the mitzvahs that are ben adam l'chaveiro, then their ben adam l'makom is also lacking. Also, one of the other ideas that I heard about this is that because Rabbi Akiva and we know, of course, also Hillel Zaken, right? It says later on, I have it over here, right? Hillel Zaken, this famous incident in the Gemara. Here is source number 11. There was another incident involving one Gentile who came before Shammai and said to Shammai, "Convert me on one condition, on condition that you teach me the entire Torah while I'm standing on one foot." And Shammai says, "No, you can't do that," and he chases him away. And then the same person, the same potential convert, came before Hillel, and he converted him and said to him, "That which is hateful to you, do not do to another." That is the entire Torah, and the rest is interpretation. Now go and learn. Okay, very famous. I'm sure you guys, had all heard that already. But it's important to read the words, okay? Because he says that is the entire Torah. So when you come to this place where, source number 5 over here, where it says that there's a love of God, but not a love of Am Yisrael, or someone's doing the mitzvahs ben adam l'makom, but not ben adam l'chaveiro, then they're basically they're like, if they're not doing a mitzvah, if they steal, chas v'shalom, right? So then they're over on the mitzvah, or the lav, right? The mitzvah's lo taseh, the negative commandment, not to steal, but they're also over on the concept or the mitzvah of ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. So it basically is like this underlying platform upon which all of the mitzvahs sit, and also on what our love for Hashem even sits. On the other hand, we'll keep on going with the quote here, when there is love of a fellow Jew, this will eventually bring also a love of Torah and a love of God. So what he's saying here is that one leg of the table basically potentially has the power to cause the other two legs to happen, but it's only the Ahavas Yisroel leg, right? The V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha leg. If someone has that, then they will eventually come to love Torah and Hashem. But if they're missing that, then they're lacking in the other two loves. When we have the three loves together, we will achieve the redemption. For just as this last galus was caused by a lack of brotherly love, so shall the final and immediate redemption, it should happen right now, mamish, be achieved by love for one's fellow. So it's very, very important to learn the principles of Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, of Ahavas Yisroel, because this is what's going to bring the geula. This is geula dika learning. This is geula dika living. Well, if we can look at the world through these eyes, then Bezrat Hashem, we should merit the geula. So that brings me to another quote, let's say, from the, not quote, part of the Rebbe's campaigns, okay? So the Rebbe, we know, had many campaigns over the years, mitzvahs that he felt were like core mitzvahs that should be taught to all Jews, and some mitzvahs that should be taught to everyone in the whole world. And Ahavas Yisrael was one of the mitzvah campaigns. It started in 1976. And I have actually for you at the end of the source sheet, and I'm happy to send this out to everybody afterwards, the source sheet, of course. But I have at the end the list of all the practical suggestions that the Rebbe actually told people to do in order to grow in Ahavas Yisrael. But the very first one that he said was that everybody should start their davening every morning with this. Okay, source number 6. I know that the Siddur Tilas Hashem actually has it printed in the text of the Siddur. In our shul, Baruch Hashem, Shirat David, I know that Rav Shlomo wrote a beautiful nigun for this, and everybody starts the davening with this song. But the line is Hareini Mekabel Alai. I sort of hereby take it upon myself. Mitzvat aseh shel ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. The positive commandment of ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, to love my fellow as myself. And again, starting the day with this sets the tone for the day. I mean, obviously there's the danger, like with everything, of, kind of just saying it without really thinking about it. But if even, once in a week, then, the thought flows through as you're saying the words. Bezrat Hashem, it should be, even more by all of us. But if once a week, once a month, if the thought kind of colors the way that we look at the rest of our day, the way that we look at everybody that we encounter the rest of the day, then it's already more than we were doing before. So to start every day with this, taking upon myself that I'm going to try to ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. I'm going to try to look at people with love. I'm going to try and look at people with eyes of non-judgment, with eyes of acceptance, with eyes of knowing that every single person is an essential note in the symphony of the world. And that changes how I look at people. It changes how I interact with people. People go from being, possibly kind of annoying to, okay, right now I'm being annoyed by them, but they're not annoying. That doesn't define who they are. It defines my attitude right now. So it's just like a flip of a switch that helps enable us to see through that lens. So we'll get to more practical suggestions at the end, but that was the first one that I just wanted to, since it's at the beginning of the siddur, I thought it should be at the beginning of the shir as well, although we're kind of in the middle of the shir already. Okay, so the next idea is that when we treat each other with Ahavas Yisroel, when we treat each other with love, then it gives nachas to Hashem. He says in the Midrash says in the Tana Debei Eliyahu Rabbah, right? This is like an early Midrash, one of the first collections of Midrashim. He says up here on the top, this is what the Holy One said to Israel, my children, what do I seek from you? I seek no more than that you have love for one another and respect for one another, and that you have reverence for one another. And I just want to like focus in for 1 second. We're all in our homes, and some of us have, Baruch Hashem, many children with us in our homes. And let's say we don't. Let's say we also have any people that are interacting with each other. Okay, so I actually we have this tradition in our family that I printed out once. It was like, in some kind of parenting blog to like print out these questions, and they're like conversation starters, and so I printed them all out. I cut them into little strips. I put them in a box, and on Shabbos night, Friday nights, we pass the box around. And everybody picks out one question, and every few months I try to refresh them a little bit, but. The other night, my question was, if you had one wish, what would it be? So I don't know if this was like a positive parenting moment, but we'll see. So it happened to be that there was a lot of fighting going on, unfortunately. And I said, my one wish would be that my children would get along, that it would be my best present, that to hear my children playing nicely with each other, speaking nicely to each other, and I imagine that is what Hashem is thinking as well, that his sincerest wish would be to see his children playing nicely with each other, to hear his children speaking nicely to each other, and see them treating each other with great respect and great reverence, and that would be, that would give him so much nachas. Imagine how much nachas you get when you do hear your children playing nicely, playing a game, or oh, can I help you with that? Like if you ever heard that, that's like gold. That is parenting gold. So kal v'chomer, right? And kaviyachol, I guess we could say, but like that Hashem also gets a lot of nachas times, a million when he hears that from us as well. And the Baal Shem Tov brings it sort of, down into like practicality here, okay? He says, I'll just start reading from the beginning. He says on the pasuk, ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, perush hapasuk ve'ahavta l'reacha, right? That you should love your fellow. Shekamo she'ata titnaheg im re'acha ba'ahava ve'achdut, like if you the way that you behave with your fellow with love and unity, kamocha ani Hashem. So I will also, right, ahavta l'reacha, kamocha ani Hashem. So I will also behave towards you in that same way. Shani Hashem ehyeh kamocha. I Hashem will be like you. Vehu besod, and he quotes the Tehillim, Hashem tzilcha. Shnitba'er b'divrei Maran, okay. Shekmo she'adam, right, that Hashem is like our shadow, right? Hashem tzilcha is like, right, like Hashem is like our shadow. He mirrors what we do. Shekmo she'adam minaheg lamata im chaveiro v're'o, that the way that we behave down here with our friends and neighbors, friends and fellows, friends and other people, b'ahava or b'midot tovot, with love and with good, like with respect and with good attributes. That's how Hashem, the King of all kings, the King on high, is going to behave towards you, towards me, towards us. The kmo hatzel, like shade or shadow, like a shadow. Shekol tnuah she'adam oseh, kach oseh hatzel kenegdo. Like every movement that a person makes, their shadow makes the same movement. Kach hu yisparach im ha'adam. That's how Hashem, the blessed is He, will be with us. V'zehu v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, ki kamocha ani Hashem. That's what it means, v'ahavta l'reacha. That's what it means, that you should behave with a loving manner towards your fellow people, because I will also then behave in a loving manner towards you. Lahitnaheg gam imcha be'ahava v'kol tuv. Right? So there's a little bit of self-interest here, right? That when we behave towards each other the way that Hashem wants us to behave, then we draw down Hashem's brachas upon us, because He is like our shadow. He behaves towards other people towards us, the way that we behave towards other people. And, obviously modern psychology is very much, gives us a personal perspective on this, that, the same way that, if you smile at someone and treat them with kindness, so then, the odds are that they're going to treat you back with the same kindness. And you can change a person's day just by, flipping the switch, instead of reacting with like anger, to react with, with a level of patience and kindness. So then that flips their switch also, and they react with, patience and kindness. And that's the same thing with our kids as well. When we behave towards them with patience and kindness, they're more likely to behave towards each other with patience and kindness. Okay. Halachically, how do we fulfill this mitzvah? I mean, it's very interesting, right? Because the mitzvah is ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, that we're supposed to love, right? Ve'ahavta, love. How are you commanded to love another person the way that you love yourself? How is that even possible? And so, on a halachic level, the halacha basically looks at behavior, okay? It doesn't really look at on a soul level. So the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvahs, he says this. He says, my mercy and love for my brother, my fellow Jew, should be exactly like the mercy and love I have for myself, specifically in regards to his money, physical welfare, and everything that will ever be in his possession or he will want. And everything that I wish for myself, I should desire for him. Right? So meaning I should, and there are many Mefarshim that say this, right? If you look at the wording, ve'ahavta le'reacha kamocha. So like, for example, Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, he explains, he says, it doesn't say ve'ahavta es reacha kamocha. It doesn't mean actually love them the way that you love yourself. It means ve'ahavta le, love to them. So show love to them the way that you would want love shown to you. How do we show love to other people? His money, his physical welfare, and everything that will ever be in his possession, right? That's how we do it. We cook meals for people. We we open the door for them. We give them clothing. We say hello to them. We speak nicely to them. We invite them for a meal. All of the things that create a sense of welcoming and a sense of love for you is how you can show love to another person. Now, we always have to be careful, obviously, because sometimes what I like is not what you like. So, and we'll get a little bit more into that when we talk about Rabbi Akiva and his students, that when I'm showing love to someone, it's kamocha, right? It's like what makes me happy, but not necessarily, right? If I love vanilla ice cream and you love chocolate ice cream, so then if I show up with vanilla ice cream and I say, well, vanilla ice cream is the best, I love vanilla ice cream. Well, okay, so fine, vanilla ice cream is lovely, but you love chocolate. And so for me to show you love would be to get you the ice cream that you want. I'm still getting you ice cream. So there's like that underlying, idea there that I'm doing for you what I think is a nice thing to do, but I have to do it in the way that is meaningful for you and not in the way that is my favorite flavor ice cream. Okay. So that's a fine line over there. And conversely, the Rambam goes on, anything that I would hate for myself or for anyone who associates with me, I should find hateful to him in the exact same fashion. This is what the Torah stated, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There's a beautiful story about the Rebbe that in 1974, in November, it was Tes Kislev. So Tes Kislev, Tes Yud is like the birthday and yahrzeit of the Mitzvah Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe's son, the second Rebbe of Chabad. And by the 70s, the Rebbe, the last Rebbe, current Rebbe, however you want to say it, the Heintiker Rebbe, they say, today's Rebbe. So by the 1970s, the Rebbe wasn't having farbrengens like all the time. He was having farbrengens, Hasidic gatherings, on special days only. So he had them on like special days in the Hasidic calendar, special days in Shabbos Mavarchim, like the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh, all specific days he had farbrengen. So, but it was like obvious that he should have a farbrengen that Shabbos because it was Shabbos. It was Tes Kislev. But there was like a system that when the person would get up to announce mincha, he would look at the Rebbe, and if the Rebbe like stood there, then that was a sign that he should announce mincha, that the time for mincha, and that meant that there was not going to be a farbrengen. But if as he got up to speak and like announce the times and the announcements like at any shul, if the Rebbe started walking away, so then that would be a sign that there was going to be a farbrengen. And the farbrengens usually started at 1:30 in the afternoon. So it would give people time to go home and have lunch and then come back for the farbrengen. And so the man got up and he started to announce, this is going to be this and the times of Shabbos and, blah, 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 whatever he was announcing in 770, something about mitzvah tanks, I'm sure, that the Rebbe just stood there. And he was like, this is weird, it's Tes Kislev, like it's a normal day for farbrengen. Why is the Rebbe standing there? And so he kind of like droned on and on, like to give the Rebbe a chance to walk away, but the Rebbe didn't walk away. And so ultimately he was forced to announce that mincha would be at, 4 o'clock or whatever it was. And there was not going to be a farbrengen. And this was like, what? No farbrengen? It was like all buzz everywhere, people, it was very surprising to people. And, so the day passed, and the next morning, he was making the announcements, and now it was Yud Kislev. So people figured, okay, there was no farbrengen on Tes Kislev. There's going to be a farbrengen on Yud Kislev because it's the same chag, basically. Okay, it's the same special day. It's the birthday and the yahrzeit of the Mitzvah Rebbe. So again, the Rebbe just stood there, and there was no farbrengen. And it was like very, very, very shocking. So later on, it came to be known what happened. There was a boy who lived in Crown Heights and who went to school, in one of the Crown Heights institutions. And this boy was unusual looking. He had kind of unusual facial features, and he had some special needs, and he was being bullied in school because of the way he looked, because of the way he talked, because of the way he moved. And the mother called the Rebbe's office, and the Rebbe actually said to her, call the principal, or the Rebbe's secretary said to her, call the principal and they'll deal with it. And so she called the principal, but the bullying didn't stop. And so she called the Rebbe's office again. And the Rebbe said, but I already dealt with this. What, are they waiting for me to come down there and, and speak to them myself? I'll call the principal. And he in fact called the principal, and the bullying was taken care of, and it stopped. Baruch Hashem. But what came to be known was that Shabbos was this boy's bar mitzvah. And so Tes Kislev was his bar mitzvah, and his like lunch, his kiddush basically started, at 12:30 or so, and people started to like rush through it, and they were like, Mazel Tov, and then lo and behold, there was a crush from 770 from the shul, and everybody said no farbrengen. There's no farbrengen. You don't have to rush. And so this boy's bar mitzvah turned, the kiddush turned into like this beautiful long event where, there was a big kilu, like they made their own farbrengen, and, with divrei Torah and stories and singing, and it was just a beautiful thing. And the next day, that Sunday afternoon, was his bar mitzvah party. And so, basically the Rebbe ultimately said, if I made it farbrengen, then everybody would have rushed out of this boy's bar mitzvah, and it would have affected how he thought of himself. And so, even though, the Rebbe's a Rebbe, and there would have been thousands of people at the farbrengen, and he could have shared, divrei Torah, could have shared divrei chizuk, but he chose that it was the chizuk that was needed at that moment was that this boy should feel special, that this boy should feel loved. And that's, that's the whole idea of physically showing people, Ahavas Yisroel, physically showing people, ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, that, if I have an opportunity to do this or do this, and, one way is going to help my friends, and the other way maybe is going to help someone that maybe doesn't have so many friends, or that I'm not particularly friends with. So then, the Rebbe would choose the second one. The Rebbe would choose the one that, the person that maybe needs it more. A little bit of musar for us, I think. Hasidic musar, right? Okay, so that's all very much within the realm of like halacha and hashkafa. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the Chassidus, okay? Although I did do the Baal Shem Tov, but I want to focus for the next few minutes on Tanya, okay? On you, Tanya. Yeah, no, just kidding. On Tanya, Perek 32, okay? Perek Lev. Perek Lev means heart, okay? Lev is Lamed Bet, is heart. And the story of Perek Lamed Beis of Tanya is that it was not in the first printed edition of Tanya, but that the Rebbe put it in afterwards. The Alter Rebbe put it in afterwards, and he Davka put it in, in the place that it was, because it's all about Ahavas Yisroel, and it is literally the heart of Tanya. So I have it for you up here on the screen. I have to figure out. I have to see how we're going on time, and determine sort of how far we're going to go with this piece. But we'll start from the beginning here, okay? V'hine al yedei kiyum hadvarim hanizkarim la'ayil. So now he put it in, in the middle of a whole other discussion, and the whole other discussion was basically the discussion of how sort of most of Tanya has to do with focusing on the soul and not on the body, and sort of feeding Ki'ilu, the soul and the godly soul, specifically, and strengthening our connection to our soul over our connection to our body, right? Our bodies want all kinds of things. And when we listen to our body too much, we drown out the body so loud that it drowns out the needs of the soul. So the previous few prakim, the previous few chapters of Tanya were all about how to sort of dull down the noise of the body and try to turn up the volume of the soul by paying attention to it. And so he says, okay, now if you put into practice everything that, that we've spoken about above, Lihiyot gufo nivzeh v'nim'as be'enav. He uses very strong language here, but it's from Tehillim, that your body becomes disgusting in your eyes and repulsive, meaning you're not going to pay attention to it. You're going to pay attention to the light that's in you, which is your soul. Rak simchato tiyeh simchat hanefesh levada. And you'll find happiness in the joy of, in connecting your divine soul, because that's real happiness, connecting to your divine soul and therefore connecting to Hashem. Hare zo derech yishara v'kala lavo lidei kiyum mitzvat ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha. This frame of mind is a direct and straightforward path to fulfilling the mitzvah of ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha. Okay, I'm over here. L'chol nefesh miYisrael, towards every single Jew. That, sorry, I'm reading from two different places. Limigadol ve'ad katan, from the greatest to the smallest. And it's very interesting that, right, in this, the way that he's going to talk about it, doesn't matter what the level of a soul is, okay? Why? Ki me'achar shegufo nim'as b'mito'av etzlo, because when your body is becomes, when you sort of stop focusing on your body and it becomes like the less important thing and kind of like, stop talking to me, I don't want to hear from you anymore, I've heard from you for 40 some odd years and I don't want to hear from you anymore. Okay, so it becomes like repulsive to me. Okay, you'll appreciate the value of the soul. V'hanefesh v'haruach mi yodea gdulatan u'me'alatan. And as for the soul and the spirit, over here, okay, as for the soul and the spirit, who knows, like, how can we even put a value on them? They're so great, they're so valuable, they're so precious. And b'shorashan u'mekoram be'elokim chayim, in their root and source in the living Hashem. So there's two ways of reading that. One is that we then start to understand, when we shut down the body a little bit, when we quiet it down, we then begin to understand the importance and the value, the preciousness of our souls. But also, it also means that we never know where a person's soul is coming from, meaning, like, I might think that I'm at like a higher level, but it's not true. I don't know anything. It's not based on how we look, and it's not based on, where we live, and it's not based on what clothing we're wearing. You can't tell where a person's what level, how great a person's soul is, and they all come from the same place. Okay, umukoram be'elokim chayim, right? They all have their root and source in Hashem. Okay, now here we go. This is the very, very important part. Okay, I mean, it's all important, but this is the heart of what I wanted to say. B'shegam shekulan mat'imot ve'av echad lekulana, because all of them are alike. That's from Shir HaShirim, and they all have one father. That's from Malachi. V'lachen, over here, v'lachen nikra'u kol Yisrael achim mamish, and therefore that's why all of Bnei Yisrael are called brothers, literally. Okay, meaning that's from Dvarim. It's a quote from Torah, but the Alter Rebbe adds in mamish. Okay, and whenever he adds in the word mamish, we understand that he's actually saying that literally we are all brothers, not just figuratively. It's such a nice thought, yeah, we're all together, it actually means we're all brothers, meaning, right, when you come from the same parents, then you are actually siblings, you are brothers and sisters. And so that's what the Rebbe is saying, pointing out here. We all come from the same place. We all come, and it's really, really important what he's saying here, that when we are focused on our body So then we all look different. And we all, as much as we look different, we think different and we behave differently and we live in different places and we have different customs and we have different, songs and we have different ways of davening and we have different minhagim on Pesach, right? But when we look on the level of soul, so then we're all the same. We're all the same because we all come from the same shoresh. And we're all connected to each other. And we are mamish sisters and brothers because we all come from the same parent, ki'ilu, right? Kavyachol, the same source. So on a soul level, we literally are all one body. There's a Gemara in the Talmud Yerushalmi in Nidarim, I think, in Nidarim, it says that if you're cutting meat, right? If you're cutting something and you cut your hand by accident, lo aleinu, right? Everyone should have healthy cutting going on. But if you cut your hand, would the one hand like smack the other hand? No, of course not, because it's all one body. And obviously this hand didn't mean to, hurt this hand, and this hand doesn't take revenge on this hand because it's all one body. It's all one entity. And so when we blur out the bodies and we focus on the souls, so at that level, that's where we can actually have true Ahavas Yisroel. That's what we're trying for. That's what we're aiming for. Because on a soul level, we're all connected. And not only that, there is some self-interest here as well, okay? Some, world interest, let's call it, okay? So he says, Nikru kol Yisrael achim mamish, mitzad shoresh nafsham b'Hashem echad, right? Because why are we all achim mamish? Because our source of our souls is all in Hashem. Rak shehagufim mechulakim, but just our bodies separate us and make us look like we're separated from each other, but it's not true. And then he goes on to say, "V'lachen ha'osim gufam ikar v'nafsham tfela," right? Those people who make their bodies primary and their souls secondary, "Efshar liyot ahava ve'achva amitim b'neihem." There cannot be. It's impossible, right? It's impossible. So when someone says, "Ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha," how can that be true? How can that be possible? Yeah, on a body level, it can't be true. But on a soul level, it can be true. So those people who put their bodies first and their soul secondary, for them, it's not possible. Ella hatluya b'davar levada. And it's only a conditional love, okay? And now we're going to keep on going a little bit because he makes a really, really important point here. Okay. V'zehu she'amar Hillel hazaken al kiyum mitzvah zo. And that's what Hillel the elder means when he says, Zehu kol haTorah kula, right? He says, this is the entire Torah, all of it. And the rest is commentary, the idach perusha. And go and learn, okay? What does he mean by that? Ki yisod v'shoresh kol haTorah, the foundation and the basis and the root principle of all of Torah, he lehagbia v'laha'alot hanefesh al haguf, ma'ala ad ikara v'shorasha dechol almin. The purpose of all of Torah is to raise and elevate the soul's importance over the body, lifting the soul higher and higher to the root and source of all worlds. And that's a quote from the Zohar, that last little bit, right? That's one purpose of Torah, but there's a second purpose of Torah, right? So the first purpose is that we be soul people, that we be soul creatures, that we focus on our soul, that we know that the soul is the main point. The soul is the ikar, not the tuffle. We are souls with bodies, not bodies with souls. And so when we live like this, we lift the soul higher and higher and higher until it attaches to its source at the highest point. Also, the other purpose, v'gam lahamshich or en sof baruchu b'knesset Yisrael, k'mo shekatuv l'kaman dahainu b'makor neshamot kol Yisrael. That the other purpose is to draw down Hashem's light into us, into the world, into the place that's created when we are behaving in this way together, with Ahava. and then he goes on to say, I'm not going to read it inside, but you guys can read it inside. He goes on to say basically that Hashem, that doesn't happen when we're split apart from each other. It doesn't happen when there's disagreement and division. It only happens when we are treating each other ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. But that is when it happens, meaning it happens then. When we treat each other with love and with respect and with caring, then we lift our souls up and we draw Hashem down into this world. So every time we treat someone with love and with respect, and every time we cook a meal for someone, and every time we, invite someone to our house, and every time we smile at someone, and every time we, show someone respect, so then it's drawing Hashem into the world and it's revealing our soul more and more into the world. We are all arevim ze lazeh. We are all, interdependent on each other. This only happens when we treat each other in this way. Okay, I want to just, I know I'm starting to get to the point of finishing. Okay, but I want to just I just want to mention, I want to go into the story of Rabbi Akiva and his students. Okay, because it's a very, very, it's relevant for this time period, and it's probably one of the most confusing stories in our history, because it says that Rabbi Akiva's students, it says here in the Gemara, I'm just going to read it in English. They said that Rabbi Akiva, here, source number 13, they said that Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of students in an area of land that stretched from Gevat to Antipatris in Judea, and they all died in one period of time. The Gemara goes on to explain that it's this period of time because they did not treat each other with respect. Now, it's very confusing, because how could that be, right? Rabbi Akiva is the one that we're always quoting. Rabbi Akiva says, "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, zeh klal gadol b'Torah." How could his students be the example that's being used as the people who did not kiyem, l'kayem that mitzvah, that did not keep that mitzvah of ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha? So the Rebbe actually explains, the Rebbe explains in a sicha that Rabbi Akiva's students, their love was an absolute love. And there was so what does an absolute love mean? It means that they loved each other so much that they all wanted each other to know what they knew, right? Meaning everything that Rabbi Akiva taught them, they just like, whatever I'm saying now, you guys are all taking it, in however many different directions there are. How many people are on here? 23 participants, so, or computers, let's say, right? So 23 different people are hearing 23 different things, even though I'm saying, one thing, but we all hear it with different ears, and we all take away different messages, and you're all making, different connections in your brains, and you're going to relate it to other people in your own way, with your own words. And so there are going to be nuances and variations, and that's how every teaching is, and that's how new Torahs are brought out, because we all have a different way of looking at things. We all have different perspectives. And excuse me. And what happened with Rabbi Akiva's students is that each one of them was so sure that his way was the right way of understanding it, that he wanted so badly to share it with the other 23,999 students and make them understand exactly what Rabbi Akiva said. What did their Rebbe say? He said this. No, he said this. No, he said this. No, he said this. And they were all right. But they didn't leave room for each other to have their different perspectives and their different nuances. So real love leaves room for that, right? We have to care enough to try to correct people when they're wrong, right? Like a parent has to correct a child, but if we let our children do whatever they want, then A, they'll be terrors, and B, we're not being parents. We're not parenting them. We're giving them too much leeway, and in some ways that's like that's an indifference, right? So we don't want that. We do want to shape and direct and guide, but not with such an overbearing hand that it has to be my way or the highway. everybody has to have their own individual way of taking it. And of course, there's, there is right and wrong, but within the right, there's millions of variations with which words someone chooses and how they, how they fulfill it and how they, all the different ways that different people understand things. And so, we have to make room for each other, and they did not make room for each other to express themselves. There's an example that the Hasidah bird, right, is the bird that is I think it's a stork, right? So it's not kosher. It's one of the birds that's listed as not kosher. But what's interesting about it is that its name is Hasidah, right? Which sounds like, oh, it's such a nice bird, right? It's a chassid, it's a Hasidah. And Rashi says it's nice to its friends. It's called a Hasidah because it's nice to its friends. But the Ger Rebbe says, yes, it's only nice to its friends. It's only nice to other birds that are just like it. It's not nice to, the bird that looks a little bit different. And that's why it's not kosher, right? And that's why its behavior is not something that we should mirror, and it's something that we should learn from to do the opposite, right? We don't only like the people that look just like us. We are commanded to, like everyone and treat everybody with respect. And there's a little clue here on how to do that, okay? I'll just finish off with this quote from Malachi. So Malachi is only 3 chapters long, and it's really interesting. It's the last book of the Navi, and it says, "V'ishru etchem kol hagoyim," and all the nations shall, call you happy. Ki tihiyu atem eretz chefetz, because you shall be the most desired of lands. Amar Hashem Tzvaot. That's what Hashem said. Okay, so very interesting. The Baal Shem Tov explains that this is a metaphor. What is it a metaphor for? Eretz chefetz. Just like the earth hides treasures of gold and silver and precious stones, so also every single individual hides, precious potential. We are all, diamonds in the rough, I guess you could say. And all we need is a little bit of love and attention and acceptance in order to uncover it, in order to accept, in order to, reveal what each one of us has to contribute, because each one of us has precious things to contribute that are essential to the world. And we know that because we're here. And Hashem put us here. And if Hashem put us here and we're here and we wake up every morning, then we have a job to do. And we have a job to do that nobody else in the whole world can do. And that's why we're here. I'll just maybe finish off with a story of Reb Shlomo. Reb Shlomo Carlebach was once speaking to, this is like a pretty famous story, I'm sure you guys have all heard it, but he was once speaking to a bunch of diamond dealers, and one guy like basically stood up and he was like, we like your music, we like your Torah, but like, why do you hang out with all those schlubs all the time? Why do you have all those weirdos hanging around you? And Reb Shlomo looked at the guy and he said, like, you're an expert in diamonds, right? And the guy's like, yeah, we all are. We're the diamond dealers union or whatever it was. And he said, well, so would you throw away $1 million diamond if it was, if it didn't look like a diamond, if it was a diamond in the rough? And the guy's like, of course not. We're experts. We would know, what's in there. We would know by just looking at it that it's a diamond, and of course we wouldn't throw it away. And so, Reb Shlomo smiled at him and he basically said, I am also an expert in diamonds, especially diamonds in the rough. And I go all around the world and all I see are diamonds everywhere. And some of them you have to polish a little bit more, and some of them need a little bit more work, but they're all diamonds. And that's really how Hashem sees us. Each one of us is a precious and essential note, like I started in the beginning, in the symphony of the world. And each one of us is a diamond. Some of us are more rough than others. But that's the perspective for us to have about everybody else. Even though this person, doesn't look like me. This person doesn't talk like me. This person doesn't necessarily act like me. So I can still choose to treat that person with respect. I can treat that person with kindness, no matter how they're treating me, right? I mean, it's a whole other sheer, we don't want to be doormats, but at the same time, there's a way of, with dignity of looking at that person and looking for the diamond that's underneath. And when we look for the diamond that's underneath, we're guaranteed to find it. When we look for the good in people, we are guaranteed to find it. And this last little bit here, which I'm happy to send out with the source sheet, is some practical steps, some practical suggestions that the Rebbe had. This is all part of the Ahavas Yisroel campaign. And it starts, like I started the shir, by, start every morning by saying, I accept upon myself the mitzvah to love my fellow Jew just as I love myself, speak only good about other Jews, look for opportunities to do another Jew a favor, support a Jewish free loan fund, bring Jewish people together, and invite other Jews to share in Torah and mitzvahs. So those are some practical steps with that through this lens of looking at each other in this way, of looking for the good, of looking for the diamond, that Bezrat Hashem, maybe each one of us can look at this list and through that lens, we can open ourselves up to doing something on this list, open ourselves up to opening up to other people and inviting them in and helping them to see how much of a precious diamond they are. So I'll give us all a bracha that we should feel the brachas that come down from Shamayim when we do this, and we should feel how much nachas we should know. Maybe it'll be, maybe we'll feel it when we know it, okay? That we should know that we're giving Hashem so much nachas, and we're bringing more and more light into the world every time we look for the good in somebody else. Mwah. Good night. Tizkula mitzvot.